Okay, once again, welcome back. And the topic for today will be a first steps for troubleshooting the proxy performance and how to avoid that. The topic itself was requested in the comments some time ago, and we actually did try to record this video a couple of days ago, but I must say that we failed. And the reason for that is the topic, like proxy troubleshooting, what could be so complicated, right? But actually it's quite a heavy and quite a big topic, and it affects not only the proxy but also the Zabbix server, the network, so there could be a lot of things that are wrong or misconfigured, and because of that the proxy performance would drop. You will see a huge queue, and probably also no data triggers would start to fire. But well, attempt number 2 for this video, and I'll try to make it more or less quick one, describing just the most, from my opinion, like the top misconfiguration and top things that you will have to do and have to use in terms of troubleshooting and fixing your proxy. So in my front end, just like before 4.0.7 from the Zabbix Dockers, I do have same Zabbix series host that we used in the previous video about active checks, and I've also added proxy, Zabbix-proxy-MySQL, and I've configured that this proxy will be monitoring my Zabbix series host. I've added also a template, operating system Linux, so I have 2 low-level discovery rules, couple of items, triggers, applications, and stuff like that. The proxy, in the administration proxies, I can see that the last seen is 2 seconds, 5, 1 second, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 1 again. So most likely there are no performance issues currently, and I can double check that in the administration queue. I do have 2 items delayed from the Zabbix proxy, but that's definitely will not be because of some issues with the proxy. Actually, not sure why it is. I've configured this setup just in a couple of minutes. So let's move on. What happens, what to do when in the morning or in the evening you notice that one of your proxies is falling behind heavily, like you start to receive a storm of events, storm of triggers, that some hosts are not reachable when there actually are, and the problem is those hosts are monitored by the proxy, and the proxy is not operating very well. So if you would go to administration queue, you would normally see overview by a proxy, the proxy name, and some thousands, hundreds of items delayed more than 5 minutes, more than 10 minutes, depends on how many items you have there. And well, from the front end, from the Zabbix server perspective, no ideas from what to begin and how to start the troubleshooting. So I have a front end here, sorry, not the front end, the CLI, and a PS grep on the Zabbix sender. That would be like the first thing that I would check in terms of troubleshooting the Zabbix proxy. What does Zabbix sender, data sender, sorry, does? In terms of inactive proxies, and all of this video mostly will be about active proxies, this process sends the data to the Zabbix server. That's it. So the proxy is monitoring all of our hosts, collecting the data in the database, and data sender is responsible to take this data and send it to the server, to the internal process called Trapper, TCP port 151. And the Zabbix server will be responsible to analyze all of that data. So what I currently see in the PS, sent one value in 0.01 seconds, one value in 0.04 seconds. Of course, my proxy is just for this video purpose, and it has just one host with like 40 something items. It's very small. But in the production, it is possible to have proxies that are operating like 500 NVPS, 2000 NVPS, or even more. 5000 NVPS if your proxy has a proper hardware, not a problem at all. So 5000 new values per second, it's quite a lot. And the thing that we're looking here, how fast the data sender is sending the values. If you see something like send 1000 values over a second, send 5000 values in 2 seconds, or 5000 values in 0 dot something seconds, that's fine. And most likely if you see a result like that, you won't have any performance issues. If you already notice the queue in the front end and some no data triggers firing, most likely you would see something like send 200 values in 20 seconds, or 1000 values in 300 something seconds. So if we would divide these two numbers, we would get a very, very small NVPS, which means that there are some issues on the proxy. Why? What's the reason why the data center is not able to send a proper amount of data per second? What would be the common thing? Since we're talking about the proxies, most likely the proxy will be somewhere else, in some other networks. Perhaps even in different cities or different countries. So the first thing that you should always think about, the network communication between the proxy and your Zabbix server. Like if the proxy is located somewhere in the Europe, but a Zabbix server is in the US, and something happens with a network link, it becomes like twice slower than usually. Of course, simply because of the network specific at that moment, the proxy will not be able to deliver the data as fast as it did before. So always check the networks. Then, couple of queries I've written here in my notepad that will help you in troubleshooting. Like this one, to see how many values are in the backlog of the proxy. This is a calculation from the IDS table and the proxy history table. And proxy history table contains all the data that's still not sent to the Zabbix server. So by writing this query, the maximal ID from the IDS table minus the next ID from the IDS where the table name is a proxy history, and limiting it with 1, you will get just an integer number. How many values are currently in the database of the proxy? That's still in the backlog, and it will be a quick query. It will not take like minutes of time, so you can execute it once. Let's say you will see some kind of the value, wait 2 seconds, execute it again. After 2 seconds, execute it again. So what's the current situation with your proxy? Is the backlog increasing or is it actually decreasing? If it is dropping, might be like dramatically in the thousands or just by a little, perhaps there was some issue on the proxy, but now it's gone. So as example, there was a network issue, but then the network again is fine and the backlog from the proxy is dropping. So based on these numbers that you will see, you can in average calculate like how much time will it take for the proxy to process all the backlog, and you will be again in a normal flow of the data. Of course, you should also think about like if my proxy has 10 millions of data not sent, still stored in the proxy history table. First of all, the table is bigger, so the performance will be slower. And despite the fact I have 10 millions values in my backlog from previous time, might be up to 1 hour by default, I am still gathering some new values. So there will be always new values coming in. And if the performance of my proxy is not the best, but it works kind of okay when there are no issues, there is a chance that the proxy will not be able to catch up with the backlog. So the issue is kind of fixed, but you see that the queue drops only by 5-10 values each 2-3 seconds, but you have 10 millions values in the backlog. So the only thing how to move on and I would say start from the scratch and fix the proxy would be to drop the backlog. And pay attention, like dropping the backlog, it means getting rid of that history that is stored in the proxy database. So you would not receive that data in the Zabbix server side. The triggers will not analyze it and it will not appear in your graphs. So if you're doing that, again, remember that you are just dropping the data which is not processed yet. And to do that, it's pretty simple. Just truncate table proxy history on the proxy side. This big exclamation mark, capital letters, bold, and everything else. All the queries are done on the proxy, not on the Zabbix server. So truncate table proxy underscore history and truncate table IDS. After this, restart the proxy process and that's it. Proxy history table will be empty, so you will not have any backlog in the database, and each new incoming data will be processed as a new data without a backlog. Don't forget about this IDS table as well. That's required. Then, what else? I would say like this one, update interval of low-level discovery items. From time to time, this is one of the most frequent problems and mistakes, and I would say misconfigurations done in the front end that may affect the performance of your proxies, and not only of the proxies, also of the Zabbix servers. You know that there are low-level discovery items in the front end, and there are default ones like network interfaces, discovery of network interfaces on hosts or file systems or Windows services. And if you're working with a Windows operating system on a daily basis, you should know how many services there are. So the JSON content produced by LLD will be quite huge. And then there also is an update interval on all of these low-level discovery rules, and by default it is set to 1 hour because, well, makes sense. It would make sense even increase them, because do we expect that the devices will have a new network interface like each 5 seconds? Most likely not. Same applies on the file systems and same applies on the Windows services. But the value, the response from that LLD is huge. The JSON, it's not just one integer, it's a JSON output, and especially with a large LLD rules, it will be huge. And the problem here is when users, Zabbix users, create their own custom templates or work on the official ones. Let's say he has a template for all the Windows systems with the default Windows Service Discovery rule and like 10 custom ones made by the user itself, and for some reason he decides to change the update interval on those to 2 seconds or 1 second or 5 or even 2 minutes. That is way too small. These LLD rules that may be applied on 1,000 hosts that are monitored by the proxy will produce just a huge amount of the history, which is kind of going to be a JSON data, and it will fill up also the database of the proxy, and it will take a lot of time for the data sender process on the proxy side to actually process all that LLD, send it to the Zabbix server, and then it will take also a lot of time on the Zabbix server side to process that LLD, to actually process the low-level discovery rule by creating a new items, triggers based on the item and trigger prototypes. So how to know that? How to find out those low-level discovery rules and update intervals? Because yeah, it would be like easy on my demo instance where I have 2 hosts and only a default templates to check all of them. In the production instance, it will definitely not be possible. So what we can do here, I have a query, this one, execute it in the proxy database. In this case, if we see some proxies failing behind, we can actually take docker ps. I will check container of my database, minus it, container id, bin bash, and I will log in to MySQL with a Zabbix credentials. Here I have a database called Zabbix Proxy, so I'm going to use that one. And I will just copy paste the query. Select count, delay from items. So all the low-level discovery rules are still stored in the items table. The only difference is additional column and additional parameter flags equals 1. That means that that item is a low-level discovery rule. If the flag is 0, it's just an item. And what am I doing? Grouping by delay, so grouping by the update interval, and order by count, just to make it easier to see in the output. So copy paste the query, and there we go. We can see that there are 2 LLD rules with a delay 1 hour. And also pay attention, because since the version 3.4, I guess, when it started to be possible to use suffixes in the update interval. So not only an integer like 60, 120, 150, but 1h for 1 hour or 5 seconds, 5s for 5 seconds. This makes understanding and also updating those items in the database level a bit complicated, because I could have 1h as 1 hour, I can have 60m as also 1 hour, and same in the seconds. So here I can see that I have only 2 low-level discovery rules with a delay of 1 hour, so it's absolutely fine. If you would see let's say count of delay 5 seconds, you need to change that update interval on those items. How to do that? Well, one option is to do that from the front end by finding those exact low-level discovery rules under the hosts or under the templates. The second option is simply to update them in the database level with just another query. But pay attention that we right now are working in the proxy database, which means that yes, it would not be any kind of problem for us to run an update query, update items, and set a different update interval on the proxy. But remember, it will not change any configuration on the Zabbix server side. So the update interval will still remain in the front end the same as it was, same in the Zabbix server database, and the next time the configuration exchange will occur after up till 1 hour by default, this setting will again be overridden, so it again will be 1 hour. So if we want to find that item, we can just type we here see an output with these 2 LLD rules with a delay 2 hours. So what we can do is select, let's say, a host ID from items where flags equals 1 and where flags equals 1 and delay equals 2 hours. Get this, so we get a 2 host IDs. And then we can use this as select host from hosts where host ID in, and these 2 actual host IDs, 102.63, 102.63. So these are actually the same. And we can see that the actual host is Zabbix series. So what we can do now, we can open the front end, use a global search, let's say Zabbix, and we see the host Zabbix series. We see the 2 discovery, low-level discovery rules with an update interval 1 hour because we previously run an update query in the proxy database, and we can change it here in the template level, most likely, so it would affect all the hosts where this template is linked, and change it to, let's say, 3 hours. And the next time the server will exchange the configuration with the proxy, all low-level discovery rules will have an update interval 3 hours. And we can actually do that now. So interval 3 hours, right? Let's go back to the CLI, exit from here, docker ps, run docker exec -it, the ID of the Zabbix server, like this. And we need to reload the config cache. So Zabbix _server -R config _cache reload. And then do the same on the proxy. Docker exec -it. Where's my proxy? Here it is. Zabbix _proxy -R config cache reload. Now let's go back to our database, this one, and the CLI. Open MySQL CLI with a MySQL -u Zabbix pzabbix. Use Zabbix Proxy again, and run the same query that we did with a grouping by delay. There we go. So now we have 2 values, 2 delay intervals, 2 update intervals. One is with 1 hour, just like we had in the front end here, so this 1 hour, and the second one is 3 hours, just like we changed in the front end. So that would be the option to do that in the front end, which might be not that easy in very large environments. So one of the options that you could do, like select where was select item ID. Let's make this one, or just write a new one. Select item ID from items where flags equals 1 and delay in let's make it equals 1 hour. So let's say we want to update this item. We can do that with an update query, but not in the proxy database, in the Zabbix server. So use Zabbix. Again, be super careful by executing any database queries in your production instance if you do not have any experience with it. Maybe don't do that at all. Use the frontend. So we have an item ID from the proxy database, and we can select everything from items where item ID equals the one that we took from the proxy DB and \G. So it's actually the same. It's still the discovery of network interfaces as defined in the global regular expression and other stuff. So right now, when we have this item ID, what we can do, we can indeed write the update items set delay equals 5 hours in this case, where flags equals 1 and item ID is, what was the item ID? 102, no, that's a host ID. 28610. Yes, so query OK, one row affected because we had just one item. And just to verify it, let's again exit from here. So run the config cache on the Zabbix server side, run the config cache reload on the proxy side, then go again to our MySQL CLI. Use Zabbix pzabbix, use Zabbix _ proxy, and select again with the grouping. There we go. So now the output is like this. One has 5 hours, the second one 3 hours. That's honestly it that I wanted to tell you today. And as usual, it occurred longer than expected. But don't think that after watching this, you are masters and professionals in troubleshooting the Zabbix proxy. I would say this is just one small tiny piece of all the processes, all the steps that needs to be made to actually find the root cause of the problem. But from my experience, these would be like the most common ones. And even if your proxies are working quite fine and you don't have any experience and you're don't experiencing any performance issues, you watch this video and you see that, hey, having LLDs with very small update interval is bad. Yes, it is. And even if you don't have those issues, I still recommend to update them for a larger period. Yes, in some cases it might be required to have some LLDs with 1 minute, 5 minutes. Those might be custom LLDs. But set those small update intervals only if that is really required and you do understand what you're doing and what could be the possible consequences of that. So, long story short, this could be perhaps a part 1 of troubleshooting series. There's definitely a lot more to tell, and I believe someday in the future we will make some additional content about this topic. But for today, thank you for your time. Questions, comments as usual in the comments, and yeah, see you in another videos. Goodbye guys.